Welcome to the Paru Zings, Appraisers on Purpose podcast. This podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? And what do they do now for their teams, their clients, and the industry? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, hello. I hope everyone's doing well. We're excited today for you to be joining us once again here at Perusing's The Power of Values, where we have a phenomenal opportunity to connect with a peer who has such an interesting backstory about how she has gotten to her current role and what a phenomenal company that she does work for. And I'm sure she'll share more about that as well. I won't steal any of the thunder, but we are so excited to have Stacy with us today, and we have so much to be able to learn from. So Stacy, I'd love to say thank you before we even start, and really look forward to today's conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about my journey through this industry. It should be a fun one to talk about.
I agree, and I believe it will be. So with that, Stacy, our opening question. So were you born this way, or how did you get into this profession?
I love it. As much as I would like to say that I was born this way because I live and breathe this industry so much, I think this profession chose me in a sense. And, in all honesty, I had really wanted to do something completely different when I went off to college. So,
what did you want to do when you went off to college?
I wanted to be an English teacher. I wanted to be a high school English teacher. So, I was not into the numbers when I was younger, which is crazy to me. And I always joke with my kids and say, hey, you don't have to like numbers now, but someday your entire profession may be based on numbers. But yeah, I wanted to go the path of being a high school English teacher. And ultimately this industry chose me, and I love it.
That's phenomenal. So so I heard you say you went off to school. When you finished, did you go into the teaching profession for a while, or did you take some employment just right at the end, or what came first?
I, right out of college, took a job with American Appraisal Associates. It was the first job to come up when I graduated. I had ended up pivoting away from the teaching kind of mid-junior year of college, transitioned more towards, being in the communication space. And so out of college, I chose this profession, kind of went into the first job that came up, lots of travel advertised. I was like, great, I'm young, I'm ready to hit the road. And really that just jumped me off into where I am now. It became the starting point.
That's amazing. So was there like a recruitment process? Like that's how you met some people maybe on campus, or because a lot of people out of school don't connect into the profession. So it's fascinating. How did that happen for you?
No, so I had just been searching job boards, looking for something that would be a good fit for myself, dealing with a lot of people, a lot in the communication space, a little bit of travel didn't scare me at the time. I had, responded to a job posting about a valuation consultant, and I applied for the job, went in and interviewed. It sounded right up, the alley of fresh out of college, learning about new things and experiences. And really that just moved into me getting that role there and spending a few years doing that.
And what, as a role coming out of college, it sounds like if you were planning to get an English major, is that the case? So you didn't come in with like finance and economics? Like, what's the role like coming in as a valuation consultant and with the firm that you started with?
Yeah, that's a great question because, I had a communication degree at that point when I graduated from college. So starting out there at American Appraisal, it was really full training right on. And, I know that we kind of have talked about this in the past, that, the thing with the inspectors, and now that we're doing all of this bifurcated, that's truly what I was doing.
Really?
Going market to market across the country, inspecting commercial properties, coming back, compiling numbers, and really being trained on site in buildings, what I started out doing. So I really firmly believe that you can really kind of hit the ground and learn by being applicable.
Wow. So that's phenomenal that, because you're quite young, so that was only just a few years ago when you were doing that. Of course, it was might have been like 4 or 5 years ago. I'm not really sure. I'm not counting, of course.
Hey,
if I was, I don't need like 2 hands to get there. So you get brought in, you get some training, and then you go, as I think I heard you say, on the road. And you're going and seeing commercial properties, around like a region, the country, the world?
Country. I say I did 33 states in 3 years.
Wow, that's more than most people have seen in their lifetime.
Oh yeah, we were in the turn and burn. We were on the road about 95% of the time, different states every week, all different commercial properties. And it really made me fall in love with this industry. I mean, one day I'd be walking a wastewater treatment plant, and the next day I'd be in a historical property in a small town in the mountains somewhere. So it really varied on what I had to, go through and experience. And I really did enjoy seeing everything from that perspective.
So here you are. What I'm taking away from that is you're brand new into the profession. You're getting significant exposure across many different types of assets. And it sounds like you had an amazing bank of frequent flyer miles and probably big time status if you were traveling 33 states in 3 years.
I flew more first class then than I have ever since. I can't seem to build up that mileage ever again. But yeah, it was great. I mean, it was the perfect lesson, I say, for myself, not just in this industry, but in people. Yeah. And it really gave me that ability to, one day I'd be meeting with somebody who is the VP of a hospital system. And then the next day I'm riding around with the director of public relations for a city municipality. And you're kind of just creating these differing relationships every single day to get your job done. And it gave me that lesson in how to really just speak with people and understand their needs and what they're truly kind of looking for and how I can help them.
That's phenomenal. That to get that exposure, but, of course you personally had an interest, as you said, in that path of being an English teacher, and you were, as you said, young and ready to travel, but also the desire to communicate, but having an interest in learning how to speak to different people and understanding their needs.
Right.
And seeing how the work that you were doing, along with your firm there, American Appraisal, could actually meet those needs. I mean, I wish everyone would have that opportunity. I know that's uncommon and atypical. So it's great. And you're getting that right at the start of your 7 or 8 year career because your youthfulness, of course.
Yeah.
From that standpoint, you continue to travel. Were you still in the same role, or did your responsibilities expand over the time you were at the firm?
My responsibilities did expand as I was there. I took on a lot more of the training for new hires that would come in, similar positions that I came in at, travel with new hires, teach them how to, measure a building, take the right angles of photographs, what to photograph. It was a really fast lesson in Marshall and Swift at the time also, because that was a lot of the basis of insurance.
Yes.
Insurance valuation. So, really being able to learn how to do that, how to do AutoCAD. It was a really, really great, what I say, blessing for my start, because it gave me some experiences that I think some appraisers never really get from the get-go. So, I started training others. I started taking on larger assignments, started taking on some, major structures across the country, a lot of risk pool insurance. So taking on, almost $1 billion book of business in different states. It's things like that I think that really expanded my knowledge base, just not of, differing valuation, but, how to handle differing states. And from a perspective of one thing that might be common in, let's say, Colorado is not common here where I am in Wisconsin. So it really changed my perspective on how I viewed things from even a review aspect as I kind of continued going forward.
And did you stay there for your whole career, or did new opportunities arise?
I did not obviously stay there my whole career. So I spent about 3.5 years there. It was great. I can't say it was all great. I mean, obviously you go through some issues when you're on the road, that the stories that I tell.
Stacy, what is one of those stories that only you can tell? Because as I appreciate, and I do travel a significant amount, but I'm also traveling at this age in my life. I did actually travel a decent bit when I was younger, because I used to work for a manufacturing company and traveled around the world, actually, doing a lot of their research and development. But that's such an unusual thing. And you bring a whole different perspective than even I did. What was it like for you being young, and did you have that issue where you couldn't rent a car because you weren't 25? Did you have that problem? That was the craziest thing.
Yes, at one point, yes. I did have that experience. The experience when you get off the plane and you have to not only pick up your car, but then you have to go separate and pick up your GPS system from the desk because when I was on the phone. I was on the road and I'd be driving pretty much everywhere by myself. So a lot of navigation issues, a lot of time spent in the mountains and spent on different coasts. But, the stories that I could tell, I was mainly by myself quite a bit. So I always like to say that I've experienced small town kind of vibes. I've been, invited to lunch at the fire station. I've been, taken out to dinner by the guys that work in public works because they're like, hey, you're coming to have dinner with us. But I've also been, held at gunpoint, and I've also had things that,
Yeah, we don't get to talk about that near enough. The extraordinary benefits. Well, life experiences. Like, this is extra compensation, psychic income, of course. Maybe detrimental. I'm sorry to hear that you've dealt with that as well.
Oh no, I mean it's a lot of times just people being protective of their properties, and that I can understand. And so just needing to show your credentials, and you keep moving, and everybody's good, but after 3.5 years, you kind of get a little burnt out. And so it was really time for me to kind of start moving on and focusing on where else I could fit in this industry and what kind of impact I could have from more of a larger perspective. And so, I moved on from there and really started going into that, really went into the age of, the 2008, 2010 era where our industry just completely changed. So that, pivoted my trajectory.
Wow. And so what type of role did you take on when you left American?
I went on to do Fannie repurchases. So that was obviously really big after, the 2008 shift. So doing a lot of review work on repurchases, I also did a lot of larger portfolio quality control during that time, a lot of consulting. And so that was really great for me to get more into the, jumbo loan process, more of the residential starting there. So it was really exciting for me. Sometimes I'd be, doing a repurchase on a home in my own state. And then, that gave me that visibility of starting to look at, nationwide properties and see those trends that are happening all over.
Yeah, that really does. And some people, because this podcast is fascinating, we get feedback from people literally across the U.S. and even from valuation professionals around the world. They may not know what a Fannie Mae repurchase is. What is that, Stacy?
Yeah, so at the time, in 2008, when there was a shift in the market and there were a lot of issues with the way that the appraisal industry was being conducted, and that's obviously since been worked on and continues to be worked on. But at the time, there were a lot of appraisals that were out there that were not necessarily structured towards the properties themselves. And there were maybe under or over valuation flags kind of happening at the time. A lot of people in our country were experiencing foreclosure and a lot of differing, distressed sales happening where Fannie Mae had to go back and they had to start really looking at their portfolios and saying, were these appraisals valid at the time? Is there anything that can be corrected, or really moving forward with the foreclosure? So it was in kind of my wheelhouse to kind of break apart those appraisals from past years and say where, at the time the appraiser may have gone awry or if the appraiser was justified. It's a hard, thing to do at the time because I think for myself, I can't speak for every appraiser, but no appraiser likes to criticize another appraiser.
No. We're not criticizing the appraiser. I mean, anyone who's taken any of the review courses knows we are asked to read, maybe review, maybe even render an opinion on the work product, not the person. Because some days you have good days and bad days. I mean, I imagine that you probably have all great days, but I do have some bad days.
Oh, I will. And
that's not the best day for me to be determining value of. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's just not as great as the great days. So that's a great point out. Thanks for sharing that, Stacy.
Yeah, it definitely is an interesting thing to look back on now as we've changed this industry so much to make sure that there aren't the same, loopholes that had happened prior. But again, you're right. We're not criticizing the appraiser. We were at that time looking at the processes that were in place and understanding if those appraisals were solid enough for, Fannie and Freddie at the time to stand on, or if they needed to kind of take that responsibility and repurchase those homes back and put them into foreclosure. So it was a big responsibility to be under, but it taught me a lot about how this industry functions beneath kind of the direct assignment level.
Yes. For people that may not have had the opportunity, and most haven't, to work directly with or for Fannie Mae, how'd you find the position?
So I worked for a firm that consulted with, which was great. So I had a little bit of a differing kind of portfolio of business. I was not just working with Fannie Mae, but I was also working with different lenders through that company. But the direct relationship there I thought was great. Any communication that I had with them, I think there is sometimes a misconception that you can not get as much responsiveness directly from those kinds of relationships, but actually, there's a lot of guidance there, and there was a lot of really instructional ways to kind of navigate how we were doing those reviews back then, and I thought it was a really positive introduction to the GSEs for me, because that was truly, I had come from kind of the valuation and in the insurance. And then moving into like the GSE aspect, it was like, okay, this is different. So I found it to be really enlightening.
I can only imagine. Now, did you get to continue your frequent flyer status? And did you relocate down to the DFW area in the process, or did you stay up north?
I stayed up north. I'm a Scotty. I am Wisconsin.
You did not have to cross the Mason-Dixon line for employment. That's impressive.
No, I am Wisconsin tried and true. No, we were contracted here. So I actually worked for a company that was in what is now my hometown. They've since relocated to be out of a different state, but at the time it was great. I was being able to do national work, but stay here, in Wisconsin and enjoy my Wisconsin lifestyle.
So maybe I'm reading between the lines. Were you getting a chance to work remote back then?
No, so they were just contracting. I wish, but they were just contracting. So all of the assignments would come into a larger database. So we had a company here. We had an office space, pretty decent sized staff of, quality control and underwriting. And really, we just went in there every day and we would communicate back and forth. We'd have meetings with them. It was really rapid. I would say it was a very rapid pace. I mean, at that time, it was such a kind of a panic mode almost, I would say. Yes. So it was a rapid pace, but I thrive on chaos. So I felt great.
You're good with changing landscapes as well.
I am. That's a good way to put it. I'm going to take that one from you too.
You're more than welcome to. So in that capacity, one of the interesting things, because many people, myself included, you get started with maybe unlike you, in a local market, in a neighborhood, maybe even in a city. But in this case, you were fortunate enough to start literally around the country. And then now, through another opportunity, you're working with Fannie Mae repurchase agreements, and you're literally working also around the country. How does someone develop some ability to actually take on that kind of work as opposed to not just being in Wisconsin?
Yeah,
because most people have no perspective. They're like, well, I'm a Wisconsin licensed professional. It's like, yeah, but you're a professional. You just happen to be in the state of Wisconsin.
Right. And I think that that's been one of the great positives for me, is that I haven't let location ever limit me from this industry. And I know that that can be a huge challenge for appraisers across the country because, we know where the majority of this industry is based. And they're typically going to be in Florida, Texas. We're looking at these major markets. And so what you have to look for are positions that are willing to be remote. And,
yes.
B, if you're in the position to navigate a change in state, that's one thing. But there are so many available positions for work where you can be where you're located and still grow with this industry for sure. I would say I'm pretty much living proof of it, that I've never had to step outside of Wisconsin, outside of vacation. And yet I work for a company that's based out of Florida.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. How did you build up? I mean, obviously you had a lot of experience. You mentioned AutoCAD, you mentioned Marshall Swift, great resources that a lot of people in the industry do not always have exposure to, if any at all. And that was, starting out in the insurance space, and here you are in the government lending space, if you will. There's a secondary market participant. How was it that you developed your comfort level and ability to contribute in terms of analyzing all these repurchase agreements? So essentially, as you talked about, there's a foreclosure action. There's generally a loss at that point, as there were significant losses at that time frame. And there's an analysis to say, hey, what can we learn from this so that we don't repeat the errors? And hey, do we want to make sure there wasn't fraud? That was another component of these. So what was your role? And then how did you really continue to develop your ability?
Yeah, that to me, I would have to attribute when I started there, I had a really great mentor. My supervisor there, longstanding appraiser in the industry, he still is. He's since moved on and is a chief appraiser at another company. He really kind of set me up for success in that aspect, because knowing that I was coming over from that insurance, and he had actually worked for the same company prior years before I had. So he knew what I was coming in from. But it really became this ability for me to shadow someone who had so much long-standing history in this industry and understood the ins and outs of the GSEs, and walk me through kind of not just how do you sit down and do this review, but what is behind this? What are we doing, and what is the purpose behind what we're doing? And that really enhanced my role in this industry, is not just the face value of going to the inspection, not just the face value of doing a review on a repurchase, but understanding the nuances to valuation and what's backing everything. That was really the first part for me. It's having a really great mentor at that point. And secondary to that, we had a ton of licensed and certified residential appraisers on our team that just helped me expand my knowledge base. And I went from, traveling the country to all of a sudden reviewing, a $40 million property in the Hamptons. And it was like, I have to lean on.
You just don't do that every single day. It's just normal, right? Somebody just, totally of course, does it.
But you have to lean on your peers, and you have to lean on industry pros, to me. I would not be where I am without really opening up the lines of communication with people that I've worked with and learning what they know. This whole business is absorption. You're absorbing the knowledge base from everybody else, and it just pays off. The more you know, it just continues. It just will grow with you.
That's such a wonderful perspective. I could not resonate more with what you're sharing. And I hear the value of being in a team setting. How do you absorb knowledge if you're not with other people? Don't get me wrong. Thankfully, the power of the internet helps break down a lot of those barriers.
Absolutely.
Like you said, you had a great mentor, and then you got to work with talented people.
Right.
And you didn't use the word, but what I have this image of is being a sponge. You're soaking it in, but like a sponge, you're soaking it in and you're putting it back out. You're not just holding on to it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that that's part of it, is that as you kind of move around and you pick up one thing from this company and one thing from this company, and maybe it's a couple things from different companies, but as you move forward, you don't leave that stuff behind. You're really, like you said, you're becoming a sponge, and you're really gathering all of that information, and you're really becoming more of an industry kind of guide yourself as you start to learn. And for me, I've always come from a perspective that if I don't know something, you better believe the next time you talk to me, I'm gonna. So that's just the way it is, because, you don't always have to be the smartest in the room, but, when you get off of that call or you get out of that meeting, it's really about, are you going to go out and find out and do the research and educate yourself, or take the class, or talk to one of your peers and figure it out, or not? And really, that's been my goal, is that, the next time I sit in a room with somebody, if that same topic comes up, I'm going to have an opinion, because that's just who I am.
Hey, that's fantastic. It's great what I continue to hear you share kind of what listening past the words you're sharing is that you either were very fortunate or very intentional or both to identify positions that really aligned with who you are and your natural strengths.
Right. That's totally true for me. I think that there have been instances where I've spent maybe a year somewhere and it was just enough for me to understand that perspective of the industry was enough for me to take on and move forward. That it maybe wasn't the right position, but I learned something from that position. And I use CoreLogic as an example for this. For me, I worked there for about a year before COVID, and I was basically creating the Brown book. You're running the numbers, you're doing the Marshall and Swift product line. And I think that for me, it became very technical, and I knew that my long-standing trajectory is that I'm an appraiser and I didn't really want to be in the tech space. But learning that Brown book from inside and out was one of the most valuable experiences for me, because now I turn around and I can look at that cost approach and I can look at all this data and say, I know exactly where it's coming from, and I can teach and train and have valid conversations about these methods.
I love the reference. For those, because we're not in a visual format, they may not know when you say the Brown book, they're like, Brown book. Well, the Fed is a beige book. What Brown book are you talking about? Could you give some description to that significant presence of the Brown book that you're referring to?
So the Brown book is the entire, I guess I would say the entire Marshall and Swift commercial book. They also have the residential cost handbook, which I was also doing at the same time. So we call it the Brown book because I guess I state myself and I put myself back that's always what my peers have called it since I worked in the
It is.
Because it is gigantic.
It's gigantic.
It is hundreds and hundreds of pages, and it really outlines costs for any type of structure that you could possibly need to know about. And then again, with the residential cost handbook, it's any type of, residential structure is in there. So, but yes, I forgot that we're not on screen, and it is a very large, probably 1 foot by, maybe it's 1.5 foot by 1 foot.
1.5 foot. Yeah.
Hundreds of pages of numerical.
I was trying to think of, so yes, that the cover, I don't know if it's actually leather or like a vinyl, but it's brown, and then all the pages are white. And then when they went to high performance, they added green pages, like the sustainable high performance, energy efficiency stuff. And they have, I think there's some yellow pages in there too.
There's some like orange.
Is that what it is? Yeah, there's some of the colored pages in there.
Trending numbers, yeah.
And it is an amazing resource. It literally is a body of knowledge in a book. And I know they make it online, available online, but I personally still like the physical copy of it because it's easier to flip through and compare pages. But anyway, aside from that, what you're touching on though is here's a resource that the vast majority of people in the profession have never been exposed to. Right. And even if you take as part of your education to be a professional, you take a cost class, whether in the States you go the commercial, you go the CG approach, or you go the CR approach, but there's never actually like the development of and using a cost manual.
Right.
And, that's the foundation of insurance work and the cost approach. So it's here you are once again getting such great exposure to one of the 3 approaches to value that's probably for most the weakest.
Right. I agree. And I think that that's exactly what it's like for me now, is that I had basically an intensive year immersed in the cost approach.
Lucky you. People are like, I can't wait to have that response.
I can't wait to dig into the cost approach for a year. I know everybody's so jealous right now, but
I can feel it.
It has helped me just move forward. And, I always say that when I talk to the appraisers that are on our panel or I talk to my peers, I want to be able to contribute and I want to help. So when they come to me with these questions about how to do certain things or about resources, that's where my knowledge base is coming from. I didn't just take the class. I dove directly into the Brown book and swam in it for a year.
Amazing. So kind of tying this together, here you are, you get an experience not everyone got to be involved in, which is on the analysis and the Fannie Mae repurchase activity. It sounds like at some point you actually left Fannie Mae. So did you stay through kind of the, not only, it sounds like you were definitely there for the peak. I heard the energy there in so much going on.
Right.
So much uncertainty. Did you stay for some period of time, and how did that kind of come to an end, and what came next?
Yeah, I think that the transitional nature of our industry kind of guided me away from the repurchase, because at some point that really started to, dwindle down. We started to recorrect, and just like the industry as it is now and as it will always be, it just goes up and down. So at that time, I moved on. I had gone to work for U.S. Bank for Red Sky Risk Services, doing a lot of their senior level review. From there, I went to CoreLogic for a little bit. So it just is a nature of kind of, I have the ability that I like to bounce around and gather knowledge, which I think we've kind of determined.
Yes.
And I like to go where I'm valuable. So, if I can contribute to another team, I've had teams reach out to me and ask me to come on board. I've also just left on my own choice, knowing that it was the end of my path. So, I think that happened a little bit with moving on from the repurchases, is just choosing that, okay, this needs to go somewhere else at this point, and I need to use this to gain more knowledge and keep going.
Oh, I can definitely appreciate that. So you step out of the government side of things and you step into direct lending. I mean, you're at U.S. Bank,
Right.
Large lender here in the United States.
Right.
What's that role like?
That was great. I mean, that to me, again, pivoting from one side of the business to the next, that seems to be my path here. But really seeing, this is where I really learned how to gauge service level agreements. We're looking at timing. This is where the turn time started to come into play. This is where I learned about the industry of what the purpose was behind every single appraisal. This is where I think at U.S. Bank, my passion for not just valuation, but for helping people, being, part of the process that gets someone into a new home. Because this is where it was really stressed. I mean, we're not just looking at, we'll get it to you in 14 days. It's somebody is relying on that appraiser to, close on their first home, or to, have a refinance or something like that. So that's where my kind of passion for that came into play.
Love that. That's phenomenal. And did you maintain, I guess the word I would use is responsibility for a large geography, or by changing to U.S. Bank and the role that you were in, were you more focused now?
I think it's been always a little bit of both. So, because I was based still in Wisconsin, U.S. Bank is not.
Wait, you're kidding me. You're still in Wisconsin. I mean, people are like, you can actually be in Wisconsin.
Right. You can live and work in Wisconsin, people all over the world. I want them to know that. You can live and work.
Beautiful place.
It is. You'll have to pry my Wisconsin license out of my hand someday.
You have a tattoo. Yeah, you have. Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I was still based in Wisconsin. Again, a national-based company. I think that's what a lot of appraisers kind of miss when they're looking for a path. Is just because you're licensed in one state does not mean that you have to just be utilizing your professional knowledge base in just that state. But again, a lot more local, because there's a lot of branches to that bank. And so a lot of direct lending, a lot of local. And there is where I met a lot of really local Wisconsin appraisers, a lot of peers that I have been able to maintain relationships with that had been longstanding in the industry, but also fresh and up and coming at the time. So now we've kind of grown into the industry together and have created these relationships. And so I smile when they come up on my panel, because you can see somebody's name who you may have worked with 20 years ago. So it's really great. It's a great way to grow, but again, it's still national ability to review and to consult and to discuss with appraisers across the nation on what they're doing and how to work the cost approach and how to, do, 1025s and 1007s and all that jazz. So it was a really good experience there.
And then, given your role in the repurchase side of things, now you're at U.S. Bank. One of the interesting things is, obviously you fully expressed your natural desire and ability to learn and grow, but how do you continue to advance? I mean, that's one of those interesting challenges. I mean, you're moving into different roles. It sounds like you're continue to be surrounded by talented people and helpful people.
Right.
Was that all it was, or was there more? Because, you have a whole different perspective than like 95, 97% of, people in and around the industry.
Yeah, it definitely did turn into more. I feel that at that stage in my career, I started taking on a lot more from a training perspective, a lot more of kind of that leadership ability to be able to kind of communicate and guide and show people how to navigate the reviews, how to make sure that they're staying on top of their education. That's really where I started turning kind of a leap towards leadership more so than just kind of navigating my own path. Because at that point, I'd always been in training. I'd always done things like that. But a lot of it was really transitioning more towards when can I move towards management and what type of position I would be looking for. Because at that point, I started thinking, I want to make an impact on this industry. And the way to do that is really to be able to communicate and to be a leader, in my perspective, was such a positive goal for me. And that's where that really began.
Well, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, because last time I checked, I don't think there's any courses that like, hey, go be a reviewer.
No.
Go be, I mean, there is a review class. I shouldn't say that, but like go be like a regional reviewer or, chief reviewer. Like that's not exactly something you just go take a course for. There's a lot of hands-on learning.
No, there really isn't. And I think that part of that too is just as you start to move in this industry a little bit further and you start to create these relationships and, deciding almost that you want to go towards more of a management or a leadership position. That's something that people have to do very mindfully. Not everyone that is in the appraisal or valuation field wants to be a leader, which is absolutely fine. Not everybody wants to do that, and that's perfect. But that was just a very mindful decision for me that as I started to grow through this industry and take on more knowledge base, I knew that eventually I would want to be in a position where I could be really effective in how I can assist in growing this industry and be a voice for people who maybe either can't be or are nervous to be or, are just coming up and they need help just navigating through it.
My heart is filled up when I hear peers share that type of approach. I would love to see that is a ripple effect and just is infectious to everyone because it really is in my perspective, it's a glass half full as opposed to a glass half empty.
Right.
And I routinely look to the accounting profession. I'm always impressed and amazed that they have, I think the numbers like 2 million plus like accountants and CPAs and what have you. And they continue to find more ways to be of value to businesses. And therefore there's a growing demand ongoingly for that. And appraisal and accounting kind of had a similar point where they were about the same size. And well, in this case, one of the siblings has just grown a lot bigger than the other.
Right. So. Right. And that's part of what I look towards, kind of in the future. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit later is, growing this profession. And I'm a firm believer in the trainee profession. I'm a firm believer in appraisers taking on trainees. And because of the way I started and really just being kind of a boots on the ground inspector, I'm a really big believer in the modernization. And I think that, there are a lot of, differing perspectives on that, but it can really start someone out who is just really interested in kind of just understanding what appraisers do. And maybe they're not sure if they want to be an appraiser. So they come on as a property data collector and they get some great training and it's going to spin. It's going to keep growing. And as long as we are encouraging and creating opportunity, we're looking at the next generation of these podcasts and of the people standing up at the expos and making these speeches, because otherwise we're phasing ourselves out. And that's exactly what we don't want to do.
So it sounds like you didn't stay at US Bank. I didn't know if by chance you became the what do they call it? The grand poobah or whatever the proper terminology is to oversee all of it. But here you are in that role. And what were some of the challenges that you experienced? I think that's another thing from a review perspective, especially a senior review perspective, that, we're in one sense, people in the valuation profession, we're all peers. We're different segments of the process contributing to the end result. What can you share that a lot of people may not have awareness of?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't stay that long. I think I was at US Bank for about 3 years also. I think that sometimes the hurdles that you go through are really not understanding what other people are doing on their own path. So when you come into an industry or you come into a specific company, I'm a big believer in visibility on communication, because if your team knows what you're doing and what your purpose and your goal is, they're going to be on that ride with you. But some of the challenges that I've had are not being exposed to that general purpose. So, I think that would be the biggest hurdle that I have. And I've learned over time that you have to ask. You have to go out and you have to ask and you have to say, what is our goal here? Because without it, you're in the dark and you start to feel like you're on an island, and that's never good. I also think that as the industry changes, there are a lot of differing attitudes that can come into differing position shifts. So, some appraisers give a lot of pushback to change, and that can really affect the way that anybody does their job in this industry. And, I think that that's part of what I navigated, is that you have to learn to adjust. You have to learn to pivot. Obviously, we were all thrown a loop during COVID, so that changed my trajectory quite a bit. It put me towards kind of leaving CoreLogic and going to the company I was at before here at NAN, and again, working remote. So that was my first taste at really full-time remote work, working for a company out of Buffalo, doing the bifurcated and hybrid, coming out of COVID. So that was a huge challenge. I think that I would just encourage anybody who's on this path to pivot and just keep pivoting. It's never going to just be easy. And this is a fast-paced industry. If you don't keep moving, it will move right around you and right past you.
That's it's interesting how it both seems to not move much at all, and yet it's moving so quickly.
Right. It depends on what position you're in. Some days I feel like I'm running a marathon all day long, which is great.
Yes.
Like I said, I love it. I love the fast pace. I love this industry. But at sometimes you think we haven't made any big moves in a while in the industry as a whole. But we're seeing that change, and that's really encouraging.
No, that's phenomenal. And for you, again, I appreciate that desire to learn. It takes you to different opportunities, different places. How did you come across your opportunity with CoreLogic? And what an interesting change of responsibilities from what you had been doing at US Bank.
Yeah, so my job at CoreLogic was, again, just a posting that had come up. I had taken a little bit of a break to do the mom thing for about a year.
That's extremely important. You probably should take more.
It's not something that a lot of people will throw out there as a gap in the resume, but I proudly do it. It is what I am. During that time, I did the mom thing, but I also, did a lot of consulting, and I stuck with it. And so it's part of being an appraiser that you have that ability to kind of create your own company in itself, that a lot of the goal with appraisal is independent. And that's why a lot of appraisers love that. So, but I started looking through job boards because I'm a valuation addict. I can't stay idle for long. And I came across the posting for CoreLogic. I had experience with Marshall and Swift from working years ago, and it just spoke to me. I thought, this to me sounds so interesting, and a total different side of it, developing the cost, learning where the cost comes from. Anybody can look at the book and say, okay, I see the numbers reported there, but who came up with that? And to me, that was so intriguing that it was like, I want this job. I want to know who came up with those numbers, and I want to be that person who came up with those. So it was almost like I challenged myself to take that position. But yeah, I interviewed for that position. I was on a family vacation, and I did a phone interview, and we just hit it off. And I spent a little over a year there before COVID, and it was great. I met a lot of great people, got to work for a company that corners the market on quite a bit of stuff, and just learn how they operate. It was really knowledge-based for me.
Phenomenal. And was your role with CoreLogic, are you, like the Brown Book, the residential cost handbook did exist. Is it that you are you like repositioning that? Like what's the role that you actually had when you went to CoreLogic? Because they'd already bought Marshall and Swift, Marshall Valuation Services. So how were you engaging with that body of knowledge?
So at the time, they were consolidating their offices, and they had some folks that were moving on or retiring. So I took over as a senior analyst there, doing basically preparing the Brown Book. So working with the cost data collectors to identify the trends, making sure that all the numbers are reported accurately, working a lot in development there. So that was like a 1-year course in how to look at SQL. It was something I had never even been like, I'm an appraiser. I wanted to be an English teacher. How did I end up here? But it definitely, so I would create the book every month, verifying the data in the book, reprinting all of the pages, helping design the pages. It was really, really interesting. But at the same time, also working on a lot larger projects, by taking that data and adapting it so that, mass appraisals could happen across the country. So, different municipalities working on their software and taking the data that's in there and being able to adapt it for assessment, which was really interesting. And that was a big part of what I did day to day outside of the actual printing of the book.
And you've touched on something that I believe we have a soft confirmation that they'll be in season 2 with us, might be in season 3, but you touched on mass valuation, if you will, assessment. Maybe share just a little bit for those that maybe are not in the profession or have never been exposed to it. Like, what is that all about? And why is that information so important?
It really is. So mass appraisal, in the sense that I've experienced it really comes down to, and I compare it a lot to, when your city or municipality or village or whatever that you live in goes through and does an assessment of all of their properties across the entire area, and they're sending you out, let's say your home was assessed at XYZ, they're doing that on a mass appraisal perspective. And in addition to that, they're also mass appraising all of the commercial property. They're doing all the valuation on any property that they own. So it could be parks and rec. It could be all of the public works. So there has to be some sort of technology base in there that can be utilized. Otherwise, it's incredibly manual. But in a mass appraisal, it can run the numbers manually or through these systems, through technologies that can produce numbers for these municipalities and do a larger, all-encompassing database for them, so that we're not sending out an appraiser to every single property in an entire city.
That is fascinating and extremely valuable. It highlights, and I appreciate you touching on that and providing some explanation to it, that there are so many roles and responsibilities for people that understand the valuation process.
Yeah.
And I know many people, because everybody just kind of throws around like, well, they're based on this website that's a government website that has all these licenses associated with it, there's X number of people. I'm like, yeah, but those are people like real narrowly defined in real estate appraisal. But when you just take a step back and talk about real estate valuation, like the industry's huge and there's so many different roles and responsibilities. And we haven't even gotten to all of yours yet. I mean, you're a wonderful example of how many different places someone can connect and learn and grow along the way.
I agree. I think that, we can't loophole ourselves into one thing. And one of the things that never scared me about a job posting is what is your experience level? What is your license level? Things like that. If you have a goal and you have the knowledge base, apply for that position and prove yourself. Be the person in the room that can have the conversation and share your expertise, because a lot of the job postings can just say, oh, we're looking for 7 to 10 years, but maybe you knocked out that experience level in 3 doing something totally different, and it could benefit that company wildly. So I've never let that deter me from ever going for something that I thought would fit me. And I've never really been turned away from something that I've gone for that I thought would fit me. Because I think when you go into it knowing I have what it takes to do this job, that's what you kind of want to look for. But you're right. This industry is huge. I mean, you could be a trainer. You could go in and train property data collectors. You can, take out a fee shop of your own. You can work in review. You can work in management. There are thousands of positions outside of just being an independent appraiser in the state that you live in. So, growth is great.
I completely agree. I think it's much more interesting when you're taking it on versus just kind of being like, oh, it's happening to me. Yeah. So speaking of taking it on versus happening to you, so you were there for I think you said about a year or so, and then you take on some new responsibilities. What comes next?
Yeah, so COVID hit, and again, we're kind of all stuck in this position of what do we do next? This is where I really needed to move into a remote position as much as I possibly could, because, offices shut down and we weren't given the option really. And, with schools and everything like that. So I had seen a posting for a position through Mueller for a director of a, kind of an alternative valuation position, leading their quality control. And I thought this is me. Quality control is my thing. So I went for that. I interviewed for that position and knew immediately, speaking with my former boss there, that it was going to be a great fit. And I just hit the ground running there August of 2020, in the heart of COVID.
Wow.
Working from home. And we just were really focused on hybrid and bifurcated and working with data inspectors that were across the nation to kind of get these reports into the appraiser's hands. And it's opened up that whole other side of the industry to me that is really kind of on the forefront with this modernization push.
So from that standpoint, a lot of people probably are not familiar with the firm that you went to work for during COVID. So kudos to you for stepping up and finding a great opportunity during that. What's their position in the marketplace?
So the company that I worked for was called Mueller Services, or Mueller Reports, they're often referred to. And so they were primarily established as an insurance company. They do insurance inspections nationally. They have a very large base of inspectors across the nation that were doing these insurance inspections, and they do it very well. They still do. So their position is that, but breaking into the valuation space at the time and kind of looking for valuation professionals to join them kind of on that journey, it really gave me the opportunity to jump in and help. So utilizing some of that same workforce, training those inspectors that were really accustomed to the insurance side of it to pivot over to learning the residential. So kind of looking at how do we train them? What are the differences? How do we maintain training and coaching? Different form development was really big there, which I was really excited to be a part of. How do we develop proprietary forms? How do we get into this hybrid space? And, what do we do to satisfy the lender needs was really important for us there. A lot of growth. I eventually grew into the position of chief quality officer there, took on a pretty large team reviewing files and kind of monitoring the quality and, again, working with forms and development. So it was great. It was really great.
So here you had an opportunity to work, and this is one of those, it's a great concept. It's been around for decades upon decades. Clayton Christensen made it famous in a book called Crossing the Chasm that goes back to like pre-Y2K kind of time frame, where things seem like they're so revolutionary, but in many cases they actually are growing. They've sprouted and they're growing in another industry. And once they grow to a certain size or critical mass, because of what they've accomplished, there's application in related or unrelated industries that in an unrelated industry, it shows up as total disruption. And it may or may not be, but it's well proven in another space.
Right. I love the word disruption. As soon as you said it, it made me smile. That's always one of the words that I think of in this industry. I mean, that's the goal. We want to create industry disruption. And I agree. I think that there are established roles that are doing things that parallel this industry that if they could intersect, could really change the face of the way that we do things. And I think that's what's happening. We're moving towards that modernization and the alt val and, things that are a little bit more alternative options. And, I saw it in action for a good 2 years there, and it worked. These valuations were spot on. I can't say every single one because we all have a bad day. But, at the end of the day, we're signing off on these reports that lenders were funding that. And the appraisers were starting to get excited about it. There's a lot of hesitancy to change, but, once you start doing them and you see the quality of work that the property data collector might have, it definitely has an impact. And you also have to know who's training that property data collector, because, it's not a big piece of it.
And then in the role that you had, you mentioned about coming in with, from a valuation services standpoint, and also like your love of kind of, QA and QC, quality assurance, quality control. What are the type of activities that you're responsible for? Because that's a role that very few people will ever actually ascend to, and they don't even understand that it exists. And then what do you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of monitoring of the team's workflow productivity, running kind of a major team, again, with the form development, coaching to the appraisers at that point on repeat kind of offender items, putting out, process changes, meeting with a lot of the lenders on, their quality needs and letters of engagement and overlays. It really became kind of an all-encompassing quality position in that I kind of oversaw what they called their quality one, where all of the property inspection reports would come in, and then their quality two, where the reports would come back from the appraiser, and we're looking at, full quality control of that report to make sure that it's meeting the needs of our lenders. So it really was all encompassing.
And have you, in your experience in that role, it always sounds like it's much more hands-on. Other people we've had the privilege of talking to in the podcast kind of move into the policy role and that piece. I don't hear you mentioning any of that. I hear you like people, you like communication.
Right. I did a lot of the quality policy, but there at Mueller, they have a chief valuation officer. So he handled all of the regulatory and compliance items. Not that I wasn't involved in a lot of the audit and things like that, but I like to get my hands dirty. I'm sure my team will laugh if they listen to this, because I'm like in the pipeline with them all the time. I'm like, where do you need me? I always say, like, where do you guys need me? And they'll be like, what are you talking about? I'll be QCing files at midnight sometimes when my kids go to bed, because it's just
wait. You mean there's actually appraisal work that happens like in that PM shift in the AM time slot? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's kind of a 24-hour business. At least it is for me. I mean, I can't speak for everybody else, but my time, there is no punch out, especially when you kind of love it as much as I do. But I've always been a people person, and I like being in there with my team. I like making sure that we're moving forward. I like helping just in general. So I think that's where I thrive.
Again, love it. I'm so grateful that there's people out there like you that have that approach. And how does that ultimately lead you into your next opportunities?
Yeah. So I have been with NAN about a year now. Again,
okay.
I came on originally as director of alternative valuations here also. About 3 months into my career here at NAN, I was brought in as the chief appraiser. So
congratulations.
Really, thank you. I hit the ground running here, and I think Joni would echo this. Joni, obviously our CEO here at NAN, would echo this, that she can read me like a book. And I right away went into process improvement. So I started looking at all of these different departments that kind of fell under the chief appraiser role, and I was like, well, this might not work, and I don't think this works, and I think this is great, and really just started structuring, and I think she was like, you just go and run with it.
That's wonderful that you actually worked for an entrepreneur and owner who understands the value of hire talented people, hire people better than yourself, and get out of the way.
Yeah, she's been a really great mentor for me. I think it might be the first time that someone really truly has looked at me and said, practice your pause, Stacy, because I am so rapid. She'll probably laugh at that.
The pause. I love that.
I work so quickly, and I am so passionate about everything that falls under my wheelhouse that sometimes I run, like, slow down, you've got this. Like, it is what it is. But it's been a great experience here. Being at NAN has been one of probably the best experiences in my career so far. And I hope to be here for longevity.
From a standpoint of the, and I know you've had a couple small opportunities along the way, but is NAN, if I understand correctly, probably the smallest large company you've worked for in your career?
Yeah, I think actually I've never really thought about that, but I would say that from a perspective of the companies that I've worked at before, it's probably the smallest workforce behind it.
Yes.
But I think that we have such a good structure that it doesn't feel that way in a sense. So that it actually caught me off guard a little bit when you said that, because I had to think about it, because on a day-to-day basis, the team here is crushing it. They just are. I mean, everybody's so effective in their role that it may not be a lot of headcount, but every single person on this team is maximizing their ability all the time. I mean, I always say one of the things I like to repeat is I could never do this alone. This team is a powerhouse. So it's really been a joy to watch everybody kind of fall into their own little niche and me to be along for the ride.
That's amazing. And then for those that don't know NAN, because why would you necessarily, depending on what part of the country you're in, or the type of valuation work you do, whether you're not in residential, you're not in lending, or you're in commercial, or you're in mass appraisal, or like you're in forestry, like whatever it might be, you're in farm and agriculture. Where does NAN sit in the world of real estate valuation?
So NAN is a national appraisal management company in AMC, and we have just about 14,000 appraisers on our panel, covering every state, every county. We are all over the place. Traditionally, NAN has come on as a conventional kind of process, which I think is still strong and steady. We do a lot of conventional work, a lot of stuff for Fannie and Freddie. A lot of our major lenders are conventional loans for the GSEs. But we're also in the commercial space. So, anyone looking for the expansion in the commercial, we're doing that. We're also doing a lot of the alternative valuation, which I had originally come on for. So a lot of the BPOs, AVMs, items like that, and really getting into fix it or flip, private lending. The hybrid is really coming around, which is really exciting for me. So we're really excited to start kind of piloting through and toying with that stuff. So we're really covering pretty much any product that you can name that you'd be looking for. NAN is working with. We have a really great specialty team here who covers a lot of our more nuanced reviews and renovation loans, a lot of FHA. So, I mean, you name it, we do it.
Yes. No, that's a broad, as you would say, if each thing you mentioned was, say, an automobile, that's a large garage to have a lot of different automobiles in, so to speak, to provide that perspective.
Our product list is very lengthy.
Which is not a bad thing to be of service to clients in a large way. For you, what's most rewarding about your role as chief real estate appraiser at NAN?
I am really, I know we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but I have been always achieving the knowledge base behind everything. So this role for me encounters a lot of training and a lot of visibility. I always joke that Joni likes to push me out of my comfort zone. But I think that that's part of it, is that I have the knowledge to give here. And I think that the team here is always willing to learn. And so what I'm getting out of this role right now is just being able to expand out our knowledge base, be able to help expand out our product offerings, work to improve the way that our panel is kind of managed and how we are really facing this industry together. I think that's really important to me. I really believe in diversification of this industry and inclusion and making sure that my team is heard and that they feel involved. And that as we grow this industry, we are diversifying. We need to hear other voices. And so I think I'm really valuing that this time as chief appraiser is giving me that opportunity to have a seat at the table and have those conversations that I had not had before, that are so, so important to where we're going.
Oh, I definitely appreciate that. So when you take stock of where you're at, I mean, you probably have most people have a 40 or 50 year career. You've got most of those years left, being so young in the industry. Of course.
Every day.
This is great. And you look ahead over the next 3 to 5 years. What do you see? What inspires you? Does anything concern you? What gets you motivated out of bed or has you stay up the extra hours? Obviously, because it's very clear in talking to you that you love what you do and that you're clear in what your goal is, and there's great alignment. And that's probably a future podcast, because again, the name of this podcast is Perusing's The Power of Values. And we'll have another time to talk a lot more about that additional side of values, because it's a bit of a double entendre. But for you in that role, love to hear what it looks like for you over the next 3 to 5 years or in the industry.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think that part of what I am hoping for in my career and in the industry, again, is the diversification. I think that one of the passion projects that I would like to see is just the expansion in trainees. I'm really a big believer in expanding education and making sure that people have not just the willingness, but the availability to come into this industry, and that I can be a resource for them as we continue to adapt and change. And I'm excited to see how the UAD changes are going to be affecting us. And I think that, we have to be open to change. And, just like every other profession, everybody is continuing to grow. Every profession continues their education. We have to do the same. We have to kind of stop getting in this rut of it's always been in this way. And I'd like to see in the next 3 to 5 years, people start to kind of come out of the shadows and say, hey, I have experience in XYZ. I just have never spoken up before. I think there's been kind of an underlying tone that, a lot of appraisers kind of keep to themselves. And I would like to see that go away. I want my panel to talk to me, and I always joke they have my cell phone number. So, I get calls all the time. But another thing is, I have conversations with my panel, and I do hear a lot of our panel expressing that they don't feel comfortable communicating some of the struggles that they're having in this industry, especially with the diversity and assignment basis and markets that they're in. And, I will say always, then you bring it to me and I will bring it forward, because if they're not able to, I will. So I would like to see more of that, is that we can start having open dialogue about, changes and attitudes and mentalities of this profession. And hopefully our team here at NAN just continues to grow, and I can help them all specialize in different little niches, and we can dominate.
I think that's fantastic. I think Joni has really built an impressive firm that is differentiated in the marketplace, and we'll have another opportunity to really talk about that. But also, what a great alignment between your personal interest and your desire to learn and grow and share, and not just absorb and hold it. And at the same time, you also mentioned, because you guys have diversified into a whole suite of offerings to clients, any insight you can share around the commercial work that you do, and or I call it NBL, non-bank lending, because that's a lot of the space and work that I've had over the years.
Yeah.
Outlook on that, because, GSEs are a huge part of one piece of lending, but there's so much more valuation assignments out there than just a residential loan.
Right. I think that the commercial and the non-bank lending or the private lending is on the rise. Especially the private lending for us. I mean, we do a lot of the commercial. I think that is really important for our certified general panel right now, is that we also are getting that work. But really, we're seeing a huge increase in that private lending because there are differing overlays to their scope of work. And what's exciting there is there's a little bit more of a flexibility in getting the valuation that you need. And I always say anything is appraisable. So, I am a big believer in like the fix and flip and the rehab. And those are like, if I could look at those all day long, I'd be just.
They're fun and fascinating.
I know. I love a good rehab budget and watching a home go from one thing to the next. And you look at our country.
Stacy, that's so beautifully geeky. I mean, I just have to say it. Like somebody else, like a spouse, would be like, "Oh, please beat me with a stick. Don't talk about that one more time." You're like, "Oh my gosh, look, like this was actually a good rehab budget. Like it's not just a bogus one. Like they're really going to do this. And look, there's a really healthy equity margin they're going to build by doing the work. Like it's sexy. It's totally sexy.
It is. I'm a valuation nerd. You called me on it. That's my purpose. That's why I'm staying up. No, I really feel like that is a space to be involved in right now. Like start having those conversations and, anyone interested in the investment side of valuation, it's such a growth area. So I'm the appraiser have that interest in the fix and flips and the rehab budgets. And if they're as nerdy as I am and want to sit down and start looking at before and after for as repaired value, there is such a space because it's so intriguing and there's portfolios of these properties. I mean, a lot of investors have 10, 20, 30 properties and they want to rehab all at once. And that's a huge book of business for an appraiser. I think it's kind of a pocket thing that a lot of appraisers could get into and they can really create a market there for themselves.
Couldn't agree with you more. So that's how I actually bought my first investment property, was having seen somebody else's numbers. I'm like, how much did you make? I was like, wait a minute, how many months were you in there? And I won't go detail because it's all about you, not about me. But it was that little segment. I'm like, you made that amount of money in that short of time. I'm like, I think I could do this. And next thing you know, I bought a property on that block. That's it's amazing because I was like, who better to invest than real estate appraisers? They have all the information. They have all the data. Like they're steeped in this space. They should be the most like wickedly successful, if they choose to be, wickedly successful net worth builders, either through passive or active work in that area because they have all the great information or access to it and the ability to analyze it.
Wow. Sure. I mean, it's just a built-in retirement plan.
Amen to that. Let's more on that later. It's not about me. It's about you. Speaking of which, so do you invest?
So we do.
Now you're really my friend. That's when you move from like, hey, that's like okay for like now you're a good friend. Like I love you.
Yeah, my husband owns a commercial real estate firm and a property management company, which I say I partner in, but he does all the work.
I get it.
But, part of that is, the investment into apartment complexes and multiplying the doors across the state and creating, expanding your portfolio. So that's definitely part of the conversations we have. So when I'm talking about rehab budgets, he is right there with me. So that's always a positive. But yeah, we invest in that. We're looking at that type of growth, for the rest of our kind of careers. Like I said, long-term retirement goals. Of course.
I'm going to date myself and throw it out there. Back in the day, there was a guy with one of the early infomercials. The first program I bought was Carlton Sheets, no money down. And I loved it. It was all about, you could get rich quick if you wanted to, but that wasn't the point. It was about get rich slow. Property ain't going unless you burn it down. Like property's not going away. People need a place to live, and you take care of people, they're going to take care of you. It's a good relationship. Love owning investment property. And then our government here in the United States gives you an extra incentive in the form of depreciation and tax benefits. And then there's a little box on your tax filing form. You get the check and suddenly all kinds of stuff opens up. But that's a little bit beyond this discussion.
Right. We would have a whole other conversation about investment properties and
very much so.
Tax exchanges and stuff like that. But I think you're right, though. The statement that I picked up in that is like, you take care of people, they take care of you. And, when you get into this business, no matter what you do, that's exactly what it is. I mean, create the relationship. and you're going to grow not just out of wealth, but, it's just creating this whole mindset change.
No, I completely agree. Well, Stacy, this has flown by. I can't even believe we well eclipsed the 1 hour mark. So for those of you who are still with us, hope you had some extra time to be getting some work done, or maybe driving to one of those long-standing appointments. This has been fascinating and fun and information-packed. And Stacy, I just want to say thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time and giving me this opportunity to chat about my journey. And it's always a pleasure.
Well, I really appreciate it, Stacy, because, the whole point of the podcast is to provide an opportunity to both inform and inspire those that are already in the industry to what else is possible. But there are so many people, a number of, not necessarily you, but me and others, that come into this industry from another place, from another industry, from another role, another responsibility. And hopefully by hearing the myriad of experiences that you've had, it may be, ding, 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 maybe this is for you. As you're listening to this, like, wow, there really are a lot of opportunities. It's so much more interesting. It's not near as boring as my, relative or somebody else talked about. Like it's like Stacy talked about sexiness and appraisal. Like,
right.
I didn't know that existed.
Right.
So we really appreciate that. And that's our goal. So please continue to share this every week. It's just so inspiring and engaging to receive comments and inquiries, as well as just appreciation for, really learned a lot. And while I've never met that person, it gives me a sense of what's out there, what's possible, and maybe what's next. So Stacy, I really do believe you contributed to that. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, as we wrap up, we are excited for our next guest, which we'll be sharing just as soon as we connect, and continue to share this. Of course, it's on Spotify and where you catch your listening pleasure. Don't be stingy, as you heard Stacy share. Share it out for others. And with that, until next time, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Paru Zings, Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing life paths and achievements of our guests. Don't forget to like us on LinkedIn and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Paru Zings, Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.